Hey guys, welcome back to the Crochet Crash Course. I just wanted to do this quick mini module almost because I realized that as we're going through a bunch of techniques, one of the other things that you should really know is how to read patterns and really understand the syntax of patterns so you can go and read whatever patterns you want. You might not want to be sitting through beginner tutorials anymore. You might just want some really quick access to how to do this one thing, and patterns can be a great way for you to do that. So I want to show you how you can actually understand patterns, and that way your entire world is about to explode because you can do so much more stuff. And again, as you're getting more advanced, there are a lot of really cool projects that you might want to make that don't necessarily have like YouTube videos to go with it. They only come in pattern form, so it can feel very intimidating to pick those up. So again, I just want to show you how to approach it, how to read it, so that you can start making use of all of those really cool resources as well as you continue to grow in the crochet world. So I'm going to pull up a couple of patterns and I will meet you back and we can go through some patterns together. We are back at my desk. So we're going to start with this first one, which is a relatively easy pattern that I wanted to go through. And it's beginner friendly for both people who are beginner crocheters, but also people who are beginner pattern readers. And the reason I picked this specific pattern is because there's just so much definition and so much explaining, and there are really great pictures, which I think is what makes this just a super beginner friendly pattern. She is giving you some really good explanation on the type of stitch that you're going to be doing in this pattern, and she is explaining how you're supposed to do this ribbing pattern, right? And she's showing you specifically, you know, here's how you insert it through both loops, this is how you insert it through the back loop only. And this means that it's a very detailed pattern, right? She's giving you all of the information, all of the visuals, everything that you need right here on this pattern, which again is really easy to take in as a beginner. And I will warn you that most patterns are not like this, but that's why I wanted to start with this one so you could really understand how in-depth this one is. She gives you some more information about how you can change up the scarf and what you can do with it. Here you have your skill level, finished sides, and she does give you a gauge. So all patterns, or at least most written patterns, will give you a gauge, and that's how you can ensure that as you're following the pattern, you're actually going to get this finished product that's going to be the same size as what the pattern is telling you it's going to, right? So if you do this gauge, you realize that it doesn't quite match. You might want to change either the yarn, the hook, or you just, I don't know, suffer through it and like do different calculations in the pattern, okay? And she's giving you how much yarn, and she's giving you the hook size that you need to use for this project, and some additional items that you're gonna need. And she does give you a list of stitches and abbreviations. And again, most patterns will have this because different people might use different abbreviations, but it's also just making sure that you know what those abbreviations mean, right? These are very common abbreviations. This is what you will see in most patterns. And then again, she's giving you some more information in the back loops only and the abbreviation for that, okay? Again, she's giving you a lot of information on how to do your back loop only. And again, just some more notes. It's written in US terminology. When you're talking about crochet, and you probably would have seen this, there's US terminology and there's UK terminology. And what that means is there are different terms that they use for the same stitch. So one of the most common things is like a double crochet in US terminology as a treble crochet in UK terminology. Most patterns that you're going to see is US terminology unless it specifies that it's UK terminology. And again, most patterns will tell you which terminology it's in. And again, she tells you that it's worked in rows, not rounds. And here's a note that the turning chain 2 does not count as a stitch. And again, patterns will tell you information like this, where it's basically for you to understand that, okay, every time I start a new round and I chain 2, I'm actually going to put my next stitch into the first stitch of that round. I'm not going to skip, because some patterns will say that the chain 2 does count as a stitch, and all of these. So all of these pattern notes are information about this specific pattern that's going to help you as you're making it. And we get to, again, some more super useful information. She's telling you how to do a slip knot. And again, this pattern is quite different from other patterns in that it is very in-depth and very detailed. All right, so you can see how this pattern is written in a way where she's literally giving you like chunks of information instead of the way that patterns are usually written, okay? Here's this line that says, for this pattern, chain 126 chains. There's your first instruction, is chain your 126 chains, okay? And then she's starting with row 1. And here is your actual row 1, okay? So this is how patterns usually go. You have row 1, starting in the 3rd chain from the hook, make 124 HDC, which is half double crochets, turn, and then that is when you end your row, okay? The number that's in the bracket at the end of all of these rows that you're going to see in a pattern, that indicates the number of stitches you should have in the row that you've just completed at the end of the row. So it's a way for you to keep track of your stitches and make sure that you're actually following the pattern correctly. If you finish this row and you go back and you count your stitches and you realize you have 125 stitches, you know that you've made an error because it doesn't match up with the number that she's saying should be at the end of this row. Once you'd finish this row, you'd go to the next row and you'd see what your next instructions are. And here in row 2, you'll see chain 2, and again in brackets she says does not count as a stitch, which means that you need to start in the first stitch, okay? So again, she says starting in the first stitch, make 1 HDC, which is a half double crochet, and then make 122 half double crochets in the back loop only. That's what the BLO means, okay? And then in the last stitch, make 1 half double crochet and then turn your work. Okay, and again, you've got your stitch count at the end of a row, and that will say 124 stitches, which again indicates that you should have 124 stitches in the end of your row. That's how you would follow this pattern. Like I said, this pattern is extremely easy to read because it's very in-depth and it's very beginner friendly. So you would just go through all of these instructions that she's giving you and you'd follow them. And then here you'll see this in a lot of stitches as well. It says row 3 to 10. When you're counting rows like this, remember that it includes the row numbers that are in there. So when she's saying row 3 to 10, you will be doing row 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10 following these specific instructions. Don't stop at 9. Here, there is no row 11, but you would again chain 2 and it's the same instructions. And so again, if at any point you're like, oh, I don't know what that abbreviation means, you can always scroll back up to the top of the pattern and see what abbreviation she put in there, okay? Again, this was a very straightforward, pretty simple pattern to follow, so it's great as a beginner crocheter. The next pattern I want to go through is closer to what you're going to usually see in patterns. And the main reason I want to go through this one, even though it's very short, the simple nature of it, is actually going to teach you things like pattern syntax a lot easier than the previous one. Here we are with the start of the pattern. Again, it starts with the materials that you're going to need for this pattern. And for this project, you're going to need this hook, you're going to need this yarn, depending on whichever size that you want. Most patterns will have a skill level as well, all right? And again, there's your abbreviation list. So you have your single crochet, your double crochet, chain, and all of the abbreviations associated with these terms that are going to be used in this pattern, all right? And again, you have your gauge, and it gives you whichever gauge you need. And again, you've got your pattern notes. So again, it says that it's worked using, you know, a single crochet. It's very repetitive. There is a video tutorial, which can be really helpful. Here we have the pattern itself. So you can see that it is a very short pattern, okay? So it starts off with chain 75 stitches. So you're like, okay, great, I can chain 75. And then row 1, you have make 2 DC in 3rd chain from hook. So again, we know that that means a double crochet, so we're going to make 2 double crochets in the 3rd chain from the hook, all right? And then you're going to skip 2 chains. So again, if you're reading this and you're like, yo, what does SK mean? You can scroll back up to the abbreviations and you can see that SK means skip, okay? And then you can come back down, you can be like, okay, great, now I know it means skip. Skip 2 chains, single crochet in next chain, make 2 double crochets in the same chain stitch, and repeat from these asterisks to end of the row, and then there's an instruction for when you get to the end of the row. So this looks like a lot of information in one line. The best way that you can make reading patterns simple is trying to divide the lines up and just taking whatever information you need for that specific period of time and then reading the next when you get there, okay? So let's start with row 1. We're gonna say, all right, to start, we need to make 2 double crochets in the 3rd chain from the hook. So that's your first instruction. Focus on that. Make your 2 double crochets in the 3rd chain from your hook, all right? Then you're gonna look at what you need to do next. Next, it says skip 2 chains and then single crochet in the next chain. There's your next instruction. You're gonna break it down. You're gonna say, all right, I have to skip 2 chains and then I got a single crochet into the next chain. Now that I've done that, what do I need to do next? You're gonna break it down again. Make 2 double crochets in the same chain stitch. Okay, I gotta do 2 double crochets again in the same stitch. What's next? Now it says repeat from the asterisk to the end of the row. That's your next instruction. Don't look further. Okay, so you're saying, all right, we're going to repeat from the asterisk. So here is your asterisk, and this is where it starts. So what this is saying is you basically have to repeat from the asterisk until that period, and you're going to repeat this instruction all the way until you get to the end of your row. So you're going to do this till you get to the end of your foundation chain, okay? So you're going to skip 2 chains, you're going to single crochet in the next chain, and then you're going to make 2 double crochets in the same chain stitch. And then you're going to go back up and you're going to skip 2 chains and you're going to SC and you're going to complete this all the way until you get to the end of the row, okay? And now when you get to the end of the row and you've just done your 2 double crochets in the same chain stitch, you can now look at that final instruction. So it says single crochet in final chain stitch of the row. And then you can chain 2 and you can turn. And that's how you can break up instructions and make sure that you're not overwhelming yourself with information and just being like, what is going on, right? And then you can go to the next row. So in the next row, again, you can break up information, right? You can 2 double crochets in the first stitch below. Great. Skip next 2 DCs, make single crochet, and 2 DCs in next single crochet. Okay, great, I can do that. And then again, repeat from the asterisk. So you're gonna go ahead and you're gonna repeat this information across the entire row. When you get to the end of the row, you're going to see that you need to make a chain, make a single crochet in the top of the turning chain 2 at end of row. So you can go back to your previous row and you can see how you made 2 double crochets in the 3rd chain from your hook, right? So you can see now that it says, okay, you need to do something in the turning chain. So you know that you skipped those 2 chains, and so you're like, all right, well, I know I gotta go into that chain now and make a single crochet, chain 2, and then turn your work, okay? And again, here we've got 73 stitches, and that should be your stitch count at the end of row 2. What this means, including turn chain made at end of previous row, if you look back at your previous row, because if you're sitting there and you're confused by this and you're like, what does this mean? Go back to the previous row, look at what the instructions were. You can see that at the end it says chain 2 and then turn. So this implies here that those chain twos act as a stitch in this pattern, okay? You remember how when we looked at the previous pattern, it says that the chain two does not count as a stitch? Now here, I don't think she said that, but you can see now by reading this instruction, those chain twos that you do to turn your work actually does count as a stitch. So now you know. And that's why she's specifying that you would have 73 stitches and you need to count that turning chain as a stitch in order for it to be 73. Because if you didn't, you would only have 72 stitches. All right. And there you go. Repeat row 2 until your blanket is 30 inches long or 60 inches long. Okay. So she hasn't given you a specific number of rows to do. You'd basically just be crocheting until you get to a certain length and you'd be measuring the length of your work. And she does say, of course, for the final row of the blanket, do not chain two, just tie off and weave in your ends. Okay, so that's how you would read a pattern that is written in a bit more of a patterny syntax. Okay. And the third and final pattern that I want to go over in this video with you, it's a little bit more advanced and it is going to be very similar to a lot of the patterns that you're going to see online. This one is an amigurumi pattern and those tend to be a little bit more technical because of the terms that they use and because of the techniques that it includes. But again, you can see that it starts with your materials as always, and you have your abbreviations. Again, this specifies that it's in US terminology, and you can see how this has a few more specific abbreviations than some of the other ones. And again, a few notes on the pattern, which some people will give you information about where you can use this pattern, and then also things like how you can improve the pattern if it's something that you're interested in. This is really what crochet patterns will look like most times, okay? So lots of abbreviations, very short terms that are very to the point. There's no extra explanations here because they're expecting that you know how to read a pattern. So in this scenario, we're looking at round 1, which again, you can look at the abbreviations here. It says round. So round 1, SC8 into a magic ring. So if you're looking at this first instruction, you're like, all right, well, I got to start with a magic ring. So you're going to make your magic ring and then you're going to single crochet 8 into the magic ring. And again, you're going to have this number at the end that's going to be your stitch count. So you should know that at the end of this round, you should have 8 stitches that you're counting, okay? And then it says round 2, increase in each stitch around, and it says 16. Now again, in this scenario, they assume that you know how to increase, which is basically putting in 2 single crochets in every stitch, which is why your stitch count doubles. So now at the end of this round, you should have 16 stitches because you're doubling it and you're increasing in this round. In round 3, you have these brackets and then you have these words in these brackets and then you have repeat 8 times. Now, when things are put into brackets, it might be to either repeat things or it could be that you need to do this certain instruction in the same stitch. In this case, it's telling you this pattern that you have to do multiple times. Now, again, some people will use an asterisk, some people will use brackets. Most people use asterisks for repetition of things. So in most patterns that you will see, these brackets will be replaced by an asterisk and it will just say repeat from asterisks 8 more times or whatever. But in this specific pattern, they've used brackets. And again, this is where it might be a little confusing, but you can read into the pattern and you'll be able to understand a little bit better. It's clear that here they mean you need to repeat what's in the brackets 8 times, but in other patterns, when they use the rounded brackets, it usually means that you have to do whatever instructions are in those brackets into the same stitch. So if they were to say double crochet, single crochet, double crochet in brackets, it usually means that you have to do a double, single, and a double into the same stitch. Otherwise, you'd have to say, do a double crochet, single crochet, double crochet into the same stitch, and pattern writers don't have time for that. duh. So in this scenario, it's just saying that you need to single crochet in the next stitch and then increase in the next stitch, and then you need to repeat that 8 times. And again, at the end of the row, you should have 24 stitches. And then again, round 5, it's saying you need to single crochet in the next 2 stitches. Now, this can get a little confusing, but when you're reading patterns, when they say in next stitch or in next 2 stitches or next 3 stitches, they're saying that in the next 3 stitches, you need to put a single crochet into each of those stitches. If they wanted you to put it into the same stitch, they would say that. They would say in next stitch, put 3 double crochets or 3 single crochets. But here they're saying single crochet in next 3 stitches. So in the next 3 stitches, put a single crochet into each one of them. And then they're saying increase in the next stitch. So what this is telling you to do is you would single crochet into 2 stitches, then you would increase. So you'd put 2 single crochets into the same stitch, and then you'd repeat. So in the next 2 stitches, you'd put 2 single crochets, okay? And you'd repeat it 8 times until you get to the end of the round and you have 32 stitches that you're counting. All right, and round 5, you're just saying single crochet in each stitch around. It's basically saying that for the entire round, you're just doing a normal single crochet in every single stitch. And you'll be able to confirm that because the stitch count is 32, and that is the same as the previous stitch count. So you know that you're not adding anything into this round, okay? And then again, in round 6, it's telling you to increase again. And so again, they're telling you for round 7 to 13, again, remember you have to include the round numbers that are included there. So again, you know, you can see here, for example, round 16, it says BLO, and then in brackets, SC in next 2 stitches decrease, close brackets, and then repeat 8 times. So it's almost like the bare minimum words that you need. So it's like back loops only. So you're like, all right, this entire round is in back loops only. You need to do this instruction, and then you need to repeat 8 times, and you need to decrease. So again, you're following these instructions, and it's very basic. It's very bare minimum language for a lot of the patterns that you're reading. So there you have it. Those are really the key things that you need to know as you're learning how to read patterns, is really understanding the syntax of patterns, okay? And this is how they are written, and that's how you would decipher it, right? Most times, it just takes time to get used to the way that patterns are written. Take your time, like reread sentences. As a beginner, it can be really helpful to just go through patterns that you already know how to do things of, or if there's a pattern that has a video associated with it, look at the pattern, look at the video, come back to the pattern, and try to match them together and make sure that you're understanding things correctly, all right? In patterns, people are assuming that you already know how to do the things they're asking you to do. They're not here to teach you how to do it. They're explaining how to create this finished project, right? They're not telling you that if you want to increase, this is how you should increase. They're assuming you already know how to increase, and they're not here to teach you how to do that. You need to go and you need to find that information yourself. So if you're looking through a pattern, you don't know what something means, Google it, look it up on YouTube, find out what it means, and then you can come back to this pattern and it'll be a lot easier to understand. For increasing specifically, people who know how to increase know that you're doing it in increments. So you're able to look at this pattern and you're able to understand, okay, great, you want me to increase, I can do that. Like, I wouldn't need to read this and go, oh, okay, so I need to now keep account. I'm like, all right, we're increasing. Like, I don't need that information. I don't need you to tell me how to increase, because at this point, I'm coming to you just so that you can tell me how to get my yarn from being yarn to being this project. I already know how to do everything in this pattern. I just need you to tell me how to get there, right?